The day Evan said, "I want a divorce," I was standing in our Austin kitchen, stirring tomato soup for our daughter. He said it like scheduling a car service, neat and even, with no extra beat. I looked at the faint lipstick on his white collar, a color that was not mine, and the sound of the spoon against the pot began to feel like tapping on something hollow. "Because of Lydia?" I asked. The name slid out as if I had practiced it for months. Lydia was the chief accountant at Hart and Lake Properties, the real estate company Evan had built with 2 hands and hundreds of handshakes around the city. He did not deny it. "We are serious. It will be better for everyone." Evan used everyone like a blanket thrown over someone who was bleeding. I nodded. "All right." For a second, I saw a small thrill flash in his eyes, the promise of a civilized, fast divorce, exactly the way a man with a packed calendar would prefer. Evan thought he knew me. He forgot that 12 years ago, when the company had only 3 people sharing a pine table, I was the one who entered the first invoices into QuickBooks, called every subcontractor for statements, and could still remember the smell of ink on a 1099. I signed the papers the way you sign for a long leave of absence. My lawyer, Jen, looked at me and asked if I was sure. I said, "I want everything by the book, and I need to see the books." In a Texas divorce, financial disclosure is mandatory. Evan probably thought I wanted bigger alimony or a few more shares. I wanted something else. Evidence. If you ask when the revenge started, I would say the second week after I moved out. I did not break things. I did not round up friends to drink. I did not post online. I walked around Lady Bird Lake every morning, sat in the public library at noon, filed public records requests to the Texas Comptroller, the Travis County offices, and the Secretary of State, and spent hours on the property data portal where every transfer leaves a paper stain. The small pieces began to fit. Recently, the company had sold several parcels to a brand new LLC called Seabrook Capital, whose address was a mailbox in the domain. A month later, Seabrook resold those parcels to the final buyers for 20 to 30% more. The middle profit disappeared. On paper, Hart and Lake only reported a tip-sized gain. In reality, Seabrook looked like a hidden company. In the divorce discovery, I demanded the full general ledger, balance sheets, sales journals, and payroll for the last 3 years. Jen smiled and said it sounded like an audit. I said I simply wanted to hear what the numbers were saying. Evan uploaded a spotless set of books to a document portal. Showroom clean. Revenue, expenses, depreciation, everything aligned. I could tell someone had cleaned house. New account codes appeared right when Seabrook began to operate. I knew how Lydia named accounts. Back when we sat at the same table, she liked city abbreviations. DAL _ HOU _. In this set, the new codes were SBK _. I skimmed and stopped at Project Structuring Advisory, monthly payments to Summit Business Consulting LLC, also at a domain address. I called Diego, the young staff accountant, the kid who once brought donuts to my house on my daughter's birthday. We met in a cafe. He looked around like even the wind had ears. "I don't want to lose my job," he said. "You will not," I said. "Stay silent, and you will lose sleep." Diego told me that for a year, Lydia had kept 2 sets of books. One lived in the ERP system. The other was an Excel file protected with a password that she jokingly called the Blue Ledger. The advisory payments went to Summit and then moved again. Some of that money came back to Seabrook as portfolio management fees. Seabrook was in someone else's name, of course, but the firm that filed the LLC formation belonged to Hart and Lake's regular lawyers. "Do you have proof?" Diego asked. "I am getting it." I held up my phone. Through divorce discovery, we had forced an export of the journal entries. SBK sought consult fee, $125,000, a memo, Phase 2 carry, right there next to the transfer date. I looked at Diego. "Password for the Blue Ledger?" He gave a sad smile. "I don't know." But if you still have a disk image of Lydia's Office Mac from when you moved, your iCloud used to back up the office machines. There might be an old copy. I sat very still. Evan had forgotten one small thing. Our family iCloud was still linked to the company Mac I used to use. There is nothing illegal about accessing the backup of my own machine, especially files created before I left. I sent that drive to Jen, and she passed it to a forensic examiner. A week later, they extracted Blue Ledger V2 backup, not the newest version, but enough to trace the path. Revenue was being split through SBK_ and reduced by nonsense fees. Evan's personal expenses, yachts and diamond rings, were labeled client entertainment. Full-time workers were forced onto 1,099 contracts to dodge employment taxes. Jen looked at the spreadsheet and exhaled. Maya, this stopped being a divorce. This is tax evasion. I nodded. I know. What do you plan to do? Give it to the right people, I said. In the United States, the right people, when taxes are involved, are IRS criminal investigation. I filed Form 3949A to report the violations and Form 211 with the whistleblower office. I did not file anonymously. I wanted my name on the line that says informant. Jen told me I was taking a risk. I said I preferred the lawful kind. A month later, I sat in a small conference room in the federal building on East 8th, across from Agent Pierce and Special Agent Liao of IRSCI. They did not look like the movies, less icy and with more yellow sticky notes. I started from the beginning. Seabrook, Summit, Blue Ledger, entertainment receipts with point-of-sale codes at a Westlake jeweler, misclassified 1099 labor on job sites. I handed over a USB. Agent Liao put on gloves and accepted it as if it were a breathing bird. Are you willing to testify before a grand jury? Pierce asked. Yes, I said, and only then noticed my hands were shaking. I did not expect the speed. Once the numbers are enough, the government moves like a drill bit. On a Tuesday morning, while Lydia was at a bank meeting, a search warrant landed on Hart and Lake's office. Field employees in hard hats watched as people in jackets with IRS letters went in and carried out boxes, servers, notebooks. Evan called me 10 times. I let the calls die. That evening, a text came from an unknown number. You just humiliated your own family. Your husband will survive this. You will lose everything. I deleted it. I made tea, watched my daughter do her math, and thought about the years I had been both mother and the company's bookkeeper, and about Lydia, a woman whose eyes always knew exactly how much to hold and how much to let go. 2 weeks later, a federal grand jury indicted Evan for conspiracy to evade taxes, false deductions, structuring transactions to conceal income, and employment tax evasion. Lydia was charged as a co-conspirator for maintaining dual books, creating shell entities, and coaching staff to optimize in ways that broke the law. Evan came to my house that night and stood on the porch. He had lost weight and looked sleep-starved. You did this, Maya? He asked, not angry, only bewildered. No, I said, opening the door just enough for him to see our daughter asleep on the sofa. You did. I only named it. He gave a short laugh. You want the whistleblower payout? I did not answer. The whistleblower office does award a percentage if the government recovers taxes, but what I wanted was interest on a different balance, the one called fairness. Lydia won't survive this, he said softly, almost pleading. She is not a bad person. Bad people do not always wear black hats, I said. Good people are not obliged to keep quiet. I testified before the grand jury on a wet day. The federal prosecutor asked about the early years, about revenue recognition, about the moment I first saw Seabrook in the property records. I tried to speak slowly and carefully, not to let my anger turn into a weapon for the other side. I talked about hands. Evan's hand always raised to beckon partners, Lydia's hand tapping 3 times when a column reconciled, my hands lifting our daughter when Evan was away. I said my revenge was not burning the house down. It was opening the curtains. Evan's lawyers tried to paint me as a bitter ex-wife. Do you resent Mr. Hart for the affair? They asked. Yes, I said. The room went quiet. I added, but I did not file a report about adultery. I filed evidence of tax evasion. Tax crimes do not always end in prison, but with dual books, shells, and a willing witness, the ending is rarely pretty. Evan took a plea on 2 counts and received 41 months. Lydia received 24 months and a 3-year ban from practicing accounting. Hart and Lake paid penalties and back taxes with interest, a figure large enough to pave a few roads. On sentencing day, I did not cry. Evan turned toward the gallery. Our eyes met, and for the first time in years, I saw the young man who once drove me down a 35 to watch the sunset. I wished he had not taken a wrong exit somewhere, that we had pulled over and asked whether we still chose each other before everything became numbers. I received a whistleblower award almost a year later. Not the headline kind, but enough to buy a small house in South Austin and seat a scholarship in our daughter's name for accounting students who prefer ethics to tricks. In my kitchen, I've framed a sheet of paper that reads, "Truth does not knock. You have to open." Lydia sent me a letter from the women's facility in Gatesville in month 10. Her cursive was as elegant as I remembered. "I know you despise me," she wrote. "I deserve it. I only want to say thank you for not letting him swallow everything." I did not reply. Maybe one day I will. Evan writes to our daughter every month about his recovery class and the tomato plants he is tending behind the fence. I do not stop him, and I do not change the name Dad on her phone. I only tell her what I believe. Grown-ups make mistakes, and grown-ups pay. On the first night after closing every file, I went to the lake. The wind felt like a fresh sheet of paper. I thought about my formula for revenge. It had no knives and no fire, only CSV files, a few court orders, and one honest statement. In this country, sometimes those are enough to bring down a wall. I texted Jen, "It is done." She replied with a coffee cup emoji. I smiled and wondered whether, if Evan had known the ending 12 years ago, he would still have chosen Lydia and it will be better for everyone. I do not know. I only know I kept my promise to myself. No screaming, no smearing, just calling things by their names and letting the law do the rest. On the way home, I bought an apple pie because my daughter loves apple pie. I set it on the table, poured 2 glasses of milk, and when she came in, I told her a story about a woman who learned how to leave quietly and then came back with the light.